Some might come to believe dragons to be the oldest living natural beings in the world, with gold dragons able to live for up to 4,400 years. But there are things in the old, forgotten forest of the ancient world which has stood the test of time even longer. There are those who have experienced the history of the old world in the flesh, and you might have walked by them without even knowing. Some say that forests have ears, and you should be careful what you say in them, and sometimes that is precisely the truth. Let's go over the 5th edition Monster Manual and see what they tell us about the Trians. Trians are awakened trees that dwell in ancient forest. Although Trians prefer to while away the days, months, and years in quiet contemplation, they fiercely protect their woodland domains from outside threats. In here we're told about the creation of the Trians. It says that a tree destined to become a Triant meditates through a long cycle of seasons, living normally for decades or centuries before realizing its potential. Trees that awaken do so only under special circumstances and in places steeped with nature's magic. Trians and powerful druids can sense when a tree has the spark of potential, and they protect such trees in secret groves as they draw near the moment of their awakening. During the long process of awakening, a tree acquires face-like features in its bark, a division of the lower trunk into legs, and long branches bending downward to serve as its arms. When it is ready, the tree pulls its legs free from the clutching earth and joins its fellows in protecting its woodland home. In here, we're told about some of their mighty powers. They say that when a treant awakens, it continues to grow exactly as it did when it was a tree. Treants created from the mightiest trees can reach great sizes while developing an innate magical power over animals and plants. Such treants can animate plants, using them to ensnare and trap intruders. They can call wild creatures to aid them or carry messages across great distances. Lastly, it says that a treant actually spends much of its time living as a normal tree. While rooted in place, a treant remains aware of its surroundings and can perceive the effects of events taking place miles away based on subtle changes nearby. Woodcutters who avoid cooling, healthy living trees and hunters who take only what they need of the forest's bounty are unlikely to arouse a treant's ire. Creatures careless with fire, those who poison the forest, and those who destroy great trees, especially a tree close to awakening, faces the treant's wrath. And then in here finally we have the monster sheet, and we can see that its natural armor is actually stronger than normal wood, but not as strong as stone. In here you can see the armor classes of different materials so that you can compare yourself. Now, like normal wood too, they resist bludgeoning and piercing while being vulnerable to fire. A non-moving treant in a forest looks just like a normal tree, so you can't really tell them apart, and they are particularly good at destroying structures. And lastly, down here we have the attacks. Nothing too crazy, just a slam attack and the ability to expertly throw objects far away. Their interesting ability though is their ability to magically animate trees, where it can grant a modicum of sentience to up to 2 threes and have them join the treant in combat. An extremely powerful ability that cannot be understated. But there you have it, the 5th edition entry for the treant, and I gotta say, it is actually one of my favorite 5th edition entries so far. Out of all of the monsters that I have covered, I would say this should be the standard. The information given is up to par with previous editions, and I literally didn't feel like I should skip anything in any of those paragraphs. Everything in there was important and to the point. But that being said, there's only so much that they can fit into a single page, so now let's go over and talk about what the 5th edition Monster Manual did not tell you about treants. First and foremost, let's talk a bit about the creation of treants, which is something the Monster Manual went through. This in particular is a great mystery because nobody knows how it really works. Sometimes treants are literally just born out of normal trees. They are normal one day, and then the next day they have opened eyes. The Monster Manual mentions that powerful druids and treants can tell which trees have potential, and that is true, but even this is not a sure gateway to knowing which trees will actually awaken. In fact, quote, not even the oldest elf or the wisest druid can predict if any particular tree will do that, end quote. Overall, it really is just a mystery. And the mystery is compounded by the fact that treants have seeds in their bodies, like normal trees do, but these seeds, when planted, will not grow into treants. Instead, they will grow into normal trees, some of which would potentially turn into treants, but not with particular greater chance than any other normal tree. Now, what the 5th edition Monster Manual didn't mention is that there are actually female treants, and those can reproduce with a greater degree of certainty. It is unclear, however, how common female treants are, or even if they know they are female. But the lore clearly states that those particular group of treants can grow in their bodies these offshoot stalks that they can remove from their bodies and then plant on the soil, and those will guaranteed grow into treants. It's funny though that the lore describes the fact that the vast majority of these reproductive shoots get eaten and taken by squirrels to build their nests. So most baby treants are lost that way, which is actually considered a good thing since most forests could not contain the amount of treants that would grow otherwise. The monster manual also didn't mention that when a treant dies, it actually turns back into a tree permanently. So these treants are awakened and born from a living tree and then die and become a normal tree again. This is why most treants are not afraid to die, since they believe that they will simply go to sleep forever and dream as a tree in the afterlife. Now that being said, even though treants are generally not afraid of dying, they understand that their presence in the forest is needed, and so they do their best to stay alive, something that can be incredibly difficult to do when you spend most of your time as a tree. See, treants sleep sometimes for months and sometimes for even years, and when they do, they don't really have much power over their surroundings and are basically at the mercy of evil. Because of this, they go about introducing various systems of protections that more than anything are designed to protect them against the natural decay and tear that normal trees go through every single day. Basically, if you ever wondered how the treants deal with wood chippers or leaf-eating ants, well, this is how they do it. To deal with woodchucks and certain types of wild horses that eat bark, treants surround their bases with a special type of violet fungi. This becomes a symbiotic relationship where the violet fungi will live off of the sap of the treant, and the fungi will protect the treant from any kind of animal who would seek to harm or eat its bark. The fungi clamps itself onto the trunk of the treant, so when the treant moves, the fungi moves with it. See, this type of fungi can lash out at enemies with skin-rotting tentacles, so most things know to stay very, very far away. Now, to deal with bark beetles, which burrow into the bark of trees to lay their eggs, and leaf ants, which chew holes in the leaves, treants encourage large bats to nest in their limbs. The bats enjoy the tall and dark privacy of the leafy crown of the treant, and then enjoy feasting on all the ants and beetles that seek to harm the treant. And you can see that there's a lot of symbiotic relationships that the treant will foster just to keep itself from getting harmed while it sleeps, though we're still not at the worst one yet. This next one is very strange. Rot grubs are one of the worst things that has ever come out of D&D. These maggots basically dig into your skin when they fight you and start eating you from the inside out. If your DM ever throws rot grubs against you, you know shit is about to go down. Well, treants actually welcome rot grubs into their bark. See, this is how it works. The worst disease that a treant can suffer from is what we call tube wilt. The inside of the treant is not completely filled, see, it's actually full of these tiny tubes that run the entire body of the treant. These tubes are meant to carry nutrients and water all throughout the body. The water that the treant gets from its roots underground go up these tubes towards the head, and the food that the leaves get through photosynthesis gets sent down through these tubes down into the rest of the body. If something were to happen to these tubes, well, the treant would just die. This is where the disease comes into play. Quote, caused by tiny spores in the soil, tube wilt enters the treant through the roots. Once inside the trunk, the spores multiply rapidly and become fungal growths that feed on the heartwood, the core of the trunk that contains most of the food tubes. The treant literally rots from the inside out. Within a few months, the treant collapses, its trunk too weak to support the weight of its limbs. It dies an agonizing death shortly thereafter, end quote. Once the treant has been afflicted by the tube wilt, there's nothing that it can normally do except utilize rot grubs, which are particularly good at eating fungal growths. See, what the treant does when it knows that it has been infected is it opens up a big hole in its bark and then fills it with rotted wood. And then it finds rot grubs and incentivizes them to enter in order to eat that rotten wood. Rot grubs are to treants what normal maggots are to humans, where if you drop a bunch of maggots on your skin, they will only eat the dead skin and leave the good normal healthy skin intact. Rot grubs go in and then eat the rotted wood inside of the treant and then make a nest in there. Once inside, they will make tunnels around the inside of the treant and start eating the fungal growths created by the tube wilt, until they eventually eat it all, which in turn will heal the treant from the terminal disease. The tunnels created by the rot grubs are actually also beneficial to the treant, as it creates more tubes for the nutrients and water to pass through the body. So as you can see, treants do their best to make connections and relationships with other natives of the forest, but those connections go even farther. Treants are one of the only creatures that can actively speak with trees. Speaking with trees in general is not that difficult, at least not for those who possess nature magic. The spell Speak with Plants is really not that high of a spell, and it also allows you to communicate with any plant to your heart's content. But treants can speak to them using their actual native language, which really is no language at all. Treants can communicate with other trees by waving their limbs and leaves by making very specific rustling sounds. Sounds that only a tree could make. Those sounds can be understood by normal trees, and those trees can respond in kind doing the same. The lore says that this method of communication is extremely slow, with various movements and rustling made after a long period of time, merely to say, "Hello, how are you?" A good treant makes friends with the trees around it, and some of the elder treants are believed to know the name of every single tree in the forest. And you might think that's impossible, but treants have incredible memory, believed to be able to remember things as old as 10,000 years old. That being said, it is not perfect memory like an aboleth would have. It's just really good, and because of that, they definitely tend to forget things, which is normal considering just how long they live. To help with this, they make these really long and complex mnemonics, which they use to remember names and kingdoms. Sometimes they use poems or songs to remember things. Now, treants are generally fairly sluggish, old creatures who sleep for years, and sometimes they need an extra boost of energy to be able to accomplish things, especially when they go to war against goblins or orcs who seek to cut down their forests. To give them that extra spark they need, treants brew a special kind of drink which they're known for. The drink itself has no specific name, but it is well known by Wood Elf clans and druids as a form of miracle drink that can basically do anything. For treants, it just gives them vigor and energy, but something that gives a creature as big and as powerful as a treant energy, well, it's bound to give a mundane creature as small and puny as a human more. Some people have claimed that drinking of the treant's special drink have cured them of fatal wounds. Others have claimed that it granted them the strength of giants. Others that it gave them unnaturally long life. Others that it physically increased their size. Some even have mentioned that it allowed them to understand the language of trees. All in all, the drinks are legendary and miraculous, and there are many who seek the treants in order to get access to this very type of drink. However, treants rarely share them unless they trust the person greatly. Treants generally don't even like speaking to any race who lives less than 500 years, so finding a person that a treant is willing to share his drink with is extremely rare, especially because it takes literally years to brew. Nobody knows how the drinks are made, but sages speculate that the base of the drink comes from their very own sap, alongside special reagents that they get from the forest and things that they trade with sylvan creatures like dryads. They keep these drinks on simple yet large wooden bowls. But yeah, that's mostly it. There's not that much else to say. We're reaching the end of the video. Just a few fun facts about the treants. For example, one easy way to be able to tell a treant from a tree in a forest is to wait for winter, because a treant's leaves never fall, even in winter. They just change into a reddish-orange color. So finding the one tree with all of its leaves intact is an easy way to figure them out in winter, to tell them apart from the normal trees. And if you're ever intending on befriending a treant, maybe because you need to ask for information or if you seek his assistance, the easiest way to do so would be to offer them a potion of fire resistance as a gift. In the lore, it is described that druids who seek an audience with important treants will always give such a potion as a tribute before asking for help. It is the only treasure that they actually keep and desire, for they hate nothing more than fire. Treants also have lairs, which you probably didn't see coming. They built their lairs in caves in the forest that they only use them to brew their drinks and to hide from thunderstorms, as lightning strikes create fire, which they abhor. Like, you will actually never find a treant just chilling in a forest when there's lightning storms brewing above. And lastly, before I go, you should know that the body of different treants can be used for different magical purposes. Birch treants have a peculiar sap that has a delectable aroma, a combination of lemon and mint. It can be used to make perfumes and food flavoring. Golden willows and black lotus treants have bark that can be boiled to produce gold and black dyes. And dark brown oak and misty gray elm treants have leaves that when eaten will cure certain fever plagues. I would like to personally thank my Patreon supporters Zach Bowell, Rucatofant, Barry Mascan, 5E Magic Shop, Daniel Umar, Morgan Johnson, Rusty Rain, Biotechnofrag, Daniel Luna, Doc Feeder, Brad Salazar, Terry Culp, The Great Codini, Walker Motley, Omega Scales, Ziran King, Ariel Nelson, Alex Cookson, Griffin Pierce, Falky951, Benjamin Bosters, Mr. Salty, Thomas Hunt, Drayden, Tesla Coil, The Role-Playing Junkies Podcast, Prince Daylight Morning Crown, Jericho Darkstar, Sabine Kurshap, Solarensis, Ordoric, William Sladden, Nathan McCumb, Bushido Burrito, AG Dare Music, Soulless Rider, Roleplay with Advantage, Stalia, Items to Astound on DM's Guild, Samuel King, Lost Crusader, Jacob Ortiz, Tython, and Sean Duthat for supporting me on Patreon at the $25 level. If you would like to support me as well, then please head on over to patreon.com/MrRex to support. Guys, thank you for watching. Thank you so much for liking and commenting and subscribing and doing all that good stuff. Thank you all just for generally for being here. You guys are awesome and I love every single one of you. There's not much for me to say, so I'll just leave you guys to it. Thank you all for being here and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.